Hi, my name is Luke from Prismatic Priming, and I'm here to talk to you today about my retro squat mercenary force. Now, before we start out, I do want to say that I had planned these guys for some time. Unfortunately, after 20 years of jokes, Games Workshop seems to have beaten me to the punchline and released the Leagues of Votann on April Fool's Day. And don't mistake this project for being a bash against the new Leagues of Votann. I am super excited for the squats to have finally returned back to the setting. After all, I planned and started this whole thing to try and make them a part of it to begin with. The original army concept was very much based around the retro kind of squats that we knew back in 2nd edition. The abhumans that lived on a rich mining planet, and I totally understand why GW had to scrap this whole idea, because they had put so many eggs in one basket in terms of themes. You had dwarven ancestor worship, of business, money-hungry, greedy people, of technologically adept engineers, motorcycle gangs, exo-miners. They were all over the place, quite honestly, and when Warhammer started to solidify their more grim-dark narrative, they were abandoned, eaten by some Tyranid hive fleet. However, I loved dwarves. I felt that they could have a place in the lore. I thought that the idea of a beaten down, cast out people from their homeworlds looking to unite to defeat a Tyranid menace as a sort of sci-fi mirror of Belegar Ironhammer, retaking his ancestral home of Karak 8 Peaks. So my inspiration behind these guys was pretty much just that. A small group of dwarves coming together under the leadership of one warlord to take back their ancestral home. I used quite a few bits to get as close to an updated squat as I could while still only using official parts. I intended for these guys to be run as Grey Hunters with a self-inflicted penalty of only having 4-inch movement. I felt the Grey Hunters were the closest 40k unit that had a lot of classic squat weapons while also being cut from a very similar cloth, as Vikings and Dwarves share a lot of the same themes present within the Space Wolves. So, to start off, we use the body of an Arkanaut from the Kharadron Overlords as the base. Using an X-Acto knife, I scrape a lot of the torso smooth while avoiding any straps or belts, as I feel like they would be great places for grenades and pouches later on. Once that was done, I began working on some green stuff that would be used for the Gambesons that they were famous for. It's not something that is 100% needed, but I feel like it really adds something to the finished product. I applied the green stuff in small tubes across the front of the torso, smoothing it out with my fingers and tools, making sure to dampen them periodically so that the green stuff didn't stick to anything. Once that was done, I realized I was going to have a hard time moving the model around without messing up any of the green stuff. So what I ended up doing was supergluing the feet of the model onto a spare bit of sprue that I could remove later on. Also, try to ignore the band-aid. I ended up cutting myself with an X-Acto knife, which seems to be very common in the hobby. Next up is one of the more fiddly bits of this conversion. Using an X-Acto knife, I carefully cut diagonal lines along the body, making sure that they were evenly spaced and similarly angled. Once that's done, repeat that process in the opposite direction to create a sort of diamond pattern. This was by far the hardest part to get done right, but don't worry. If you mess up, simply re-smooth your green stuff with your finger or tool and try again. The next part of the Gambeson is similar to the torso. I start off by getting a rolled tube of green stuff and wrapping it around the body just below the belt. Using a tool, I smooth it out and begin carving the same pattern as before all around the torso, this time being very careful to avoid the edge of the coat. Once that grid is cut in, I use my knife to score a very small trim around the edge of the coat. And with that done, you've completed the Gambeson. Something I would look out for in the future when doing this is leaving the green stuff too thin, as having a nice, kind of thicker layer makes it much easier to score that pattern into without tearing it off your model. For the heads, I ended up using the ones that came in the Gyrocopter set. I felt like the goggles and the short beards really fit the retro look of the squats, although the Kharadron heads would also have worked. I attached it by using a small ball of green stuff to act as a neck. Now, as for the weapons, I equipped my first dwarf with a bolter that I sourced from the Orlock upgrade box. I started by testing the fit and shaving down the arms and the shoulders of the model. Once the arms were glued to the gun, I could continue to test the fit of it against the body and make small adjustments with my knife and file. I will say that my first attempt at this was rough, and I ended up needing to use some green stuff to fill the gap between the arm and the body, as I had clipped off too much by mistake. Make sure to always double check before you make any cuts. Luckily for me, the bulky Ironbreaker Shoulders would hide most of my mistakes. In the meantime, I also prepared some various bits from different Genestealer cult kits to help spruce up the model later on. I ended up using the shoulder lamp as well as any extra grenades or pouches off the Neophyte kit. But to go back to the weapons, I actually ended up using the same process for the bolter with a plasma gun and a bolt pistol, this time being much more careful to how they fit, and honestly, you can hardly tell that these don't belong in the same kit. It's pretty awesome. The last weapon I used was unique to the Sergeant. It was a power axe that I had simply used from the Kharadron kit, as they had these really cool tool axe combos that I think gave them a really scrappy and utilitarian weapon. The last part is of course the backpack that is often depicted on tons of squad art. The backpacks I ended up using, because there are tons in Warhammer, was from the Atalan Jackal's kit. I went with that one just because it was simply what I had, but if you're going to use these, make sure to scrape off any cult iconography unless you want squat Genestealers. After a quick Zenithal highlight, this is what we're left with. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy with how they turned out. Even with the League of Votann on the horizon, I still think that these guys were worth working on, and hopefully this won't be the last of them. Let me know if you guys like the retro style squats, or how excited you are about the leagues, and what you think I should do with these guys now that I have the bits to make more of them. Thanks for watching, and if you want to, feel free to subscribe to my channel for up-and-coming conversion projects, or follow me on Instagram for more. Cheers.